All right, and we're live, everybody. It says so on Luke's sign. All right, let's get going. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday, January 28th, 2022. This week, we're going to talk about Apple's most recent earnings report, some new rumors, and we're going to take a look at the latest software betas that launched this week because it's very exciting and because this is the iMore show. Joining me as always is iMore contributor Karen Freeman. Hey, Karen.
Hello.
And joining us once again as our special guest is iMore writer Luke Filipovich. Hey, Luke.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
All right. Let's dive into this. First, the money. Apple made all of it. There aren't any more dollars. So
yeah,
all of it again.
That's the end of the economy, everybody. Good game. Good game. Apple made so much money in this. It's another record-shattering quarter or whatever. Yeah, what 123.9 billion in revenue.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I can't comprehend the number, really. I mean, you think you can. You think, 123.9 billion. That's, do you know how many government programs that would fund? How many it's truly astronomical amounts of money here. And it was across most of their product devices, or most of their product and services categories went up. The only one that went down a bit was iPad, but Apple had offered some warning on that last time around. But yeah, iPhone was up, Mac was up, services, wearables, all up. It was a big quarter. What do you say? It was the Christmas quarter. So
yeah,
not surprising. So my question is, when does Apple build the sleek, stylish Scrooge McDuckian vault on Apple Park at Apple Park to just like have people dive into the money and swim around?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there'd still be a VIP list that can actually dive in the money. You know, it'd be like Tim Cook and Craig Federighi and people like that can dive in the money.
Yeah. People on all of the people that are on Apple's like bio page, like press bio page.
Yeah.
All of them automatically on the list.
Yeah, all the executives essentially. They're automatically on the list.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I mean, there's not a lot to say about it. It's so much money. So much money every time.
Yeah.
When I was in elementary school, our teacher had an activity to just have us get a concept of what a million was. So she had us all pop popcorn at home and bring it in, bags and bags and bags of popcorn. And we counted out 1 million kernels of popcorn. And it took us like weeks, the whole class counting for like an hour a day.
Oh, I was going to say,
was just a lousy like million. Yeah,
That's
no,
funny.
just for like a period of time. I mean, the point was it took a long time, a lot longer than any of us expected.
Yeah.
And that was just a lousy million. That's what, like a half a day's earnings for Apple.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I'm not doing the math, but
I was going to say that might be like a maybe a couple hours earnings for Apple at this point. Who even knows?
Right.
I'm curious. I mean, everything always seems to go up. Like you said, iPad took a bit of a dip, but I'm kind of curious about, I'm always curious about where their limit is or how high the ceiling is on services, since, you know, in the last few years, Apple's really been making a push into those. You know, like Apple TV is still relatively new. Apple TV Plus, Fitness Plus is still very new. And they kind of keep, and I mean, the upgrades they made to Apple Music recently, with including, you know, spatial audio, and then now the lossless audio at no additional cost if you are on the individual plan or the family plan. I'm curious kind of what the ceiling is on that, because it really does seem like they view that as a very good revenue source, and it's clearly is. So I'm kind of curious at where it goes, what services do they tap into next? You know, I'm always wondering what they might offer kind of coming in the future. So that's one of the ones out of this earning call that I think, pardon me, is the most exciting for me, is to see how much services are making, because I feel like that'll just entice Apple to keep them relevant and good and keep pumping out the content, and then potentially expand into new new horizons. So I'm
Yeah,
interested
Apple
with
likes
that.
them too because the profit margins have to be much higher on services
Astronomically
than
high.
on products. So I think
Totally.
the sky's the limit. I mean, they're just going to
Mhm.
keep churning out. I
I
mean,
mean,
even if just Apple TV is it just I find the quality of Apple TV content to be really high, and
mhm.
they can keep doing that.
Here's my question about that, actually, Karen. That's an interesting point you bring up about the quality level of Apple TV content. Would you have expected that? Did you expect that like before Apple TV launched? Like this is
No,
just gonna be
no,
an
I was
yeah.
like, yeah, I was like a Grinch about it. I'm like, well, I'll take the free sample, but I'm not going to pay for it. And sure enough, when it came time to re-up, I'm just like, oh, let's just let it go. Let's
2
just
years
let's see how
later.
it goes. And sure enough, I got hooked to some of the shows, and now I'm a
Here we
subscriber.
are.
Yeah.
Here we are. Yeah, it was that's very, that's a very interesting when you bring up Luke, because I keep thinking, they're so like services happy right now. They went and they rebranded part of iCloud last summer to iCloud Plus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still, at that point, it was the same stuff that they had been offering in the paid plan, just
Mhm.
rebranded. But then they added things like private relay and custom email domains and that kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's are they going to just rename an existing service? Are they going to come up with a completely new one?
Yeah. Well, and
It's
when you
anybody's
think
guess
like,
at this point.
I mean, I mentioned ones that are relatively new at Apple Arcade. Once again, still pretty new, only a couple of years um, for that one. And with rumors of the Apple headset, which is apparently supposed to have some sort of gaming focus, from what we know, but who knows? But if it does, does that lead into Apple Arcade? Does that lead into a different thing? It'll be interesting to see where that goes too. Yeah, I think the services are kind of like, it's funny because we talk about subscription fatigue, and definitely people have it, but clearly it's not enough people, or it's not compelling people to stop subscribing to new ones, at least, or at least to stop subscribing to Apple's ones. So we'll have to see. I'll have to see where it goes. But I'm always interested in what the services are going to be.
So
Yeah, I mean, subscription fatigue is definitely a real thing, but
Mhm.
I think that Apple has made some good choices to be the ones that people keep subscribing to in many cases.
So my question for the two of you is, like, is there a service that you can think of that you subscribe to or have subscribed to in the past that isn't covered basically by Apple's current offering, that you think that would be almost a natural expansion for them? Like, is there a type of service that they could cover next? Because they've got TV, music, fitness, news,
I feel like they would
cloud stuff.
potentially roll it into Fitness Plus, which I would be okay with. Although I would be okay if it's a separate service all its own. But I feel like if they had like a specific meditation or a specific like mental health service, or like Calm, like apps like Calm or Headspace, things like that.
I gotcha.
I want that really bad. I really do, actually, because I've used apps like that in the past, and I do find them helpful personally for me to kind of keep some of my anxiety and focus in check. And I feel like Apple definitely has the basis for it. When I use Apple Fitness Plus, I definitely kind of always make sure to do a meditative cool down, because I find that not only is that a great way to get like cool down from your workout, it kind of like centers my mind again a little bit, which I find very helpful. And I think there's a lot of people out there who do find that stuff helpful. And guided meditation can be a great resource. And so that's one that I've always wanted to see. It's kind of one that I've been talking about for a while. When they switched Apple Watch to the mindfulness app, I would like, when we kind of first heard that, I was curious to see what they were going to do with it. Then I was a little let down with the fact that that it just didn't go anywhere where I thought it was going to go. It's kind of like a just another, like, Reflect is just kind of another Breathe. It's just a little different. And so it wasn't anything like ground shattering, but I'm kind of hoping that they expand on that. I don't know if I don't, like I said, I don't know if they would like full out just like make their own thing, like a mindfulness would then become like a big, a big app or a service, or if they would just roll it into Fitness Plus. That might be more likely. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm curious. I think that's the one that I would be most excited for if I heard that they were planning a new service.
Yeah, I think Apple should definitely expand in that arena, but I don't think it should be a separate, additionally paid
Yeah.
service. I think they should roll it into whether it's fitness or podcasts or music. I mean, there or even Apple TV. I mean, there are a number of places where they could add a lot more content in that area.
Yeah, I
And
think, and like I said, I think more likely, I think it probably fits in with Apple Fitness Plus a little bit more, and they
Yeah,
could definitely expand that side of it and get specific coaches and therapists or resources or
right.
psychologists to kind of be able to lead that, because it's not like they don't have the money to go get the talent they need or to
Oh,
produce
sure.
any content they need. So yeah, that would be the one that I'm most excited for, and I think it probably would naturally kind of slide into the Fitness Plus umbrella.
yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely think you're right. I will also say that if, in expanding into new services, and I might be a little biased here because I do use Apple One, do pay for Apple One. I
Right.
would like them to see them roll that stuff into Apple One, at least for the first little bit, without increasing the price. I think that's, I think that is I think I'm showing my bias there a little bit, but please let's do that.
yeah. Another area they could expand is books.
Yeah,
Having some kind of
True.
unlimited service, where you pay a couple bucks a month and you can read as many books as you want, whether it's audiobooks or, in the iBooks app on your iPad or
I feel like
whatever.
there was
I'm a
a
huge reader, so
I feel like there
that's
was
something I'd be
I
interested
feel
in.
like there was a rumor to that effect fairly recently, specifically surrounding audiobooks. I I may be just making this up in my own brain here, but I think I saw that in the last couple of weeks that there was a rumor of some kind of audiobook service. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Like an Audible competitor, there's not really currently a solid Audible competitor,
yeah,
and there
yeah,
ought to
and
be.
I read my books almost exclusively. I'm not so much into audiobooks, although I know a lot of people are super into
Mhm,
that. I like to actually read them, and I read them almost exclusively on my iPad Mini. And I
Mhm.
currently get almost all of my reading material from the Libby app by Overdrive through
yeah.
the public library, which is fantastic. I can read all the books I want for free. The problem is if it's a popular book, like if it's the hot new book that all the book clubs are reading right
Yeah.
now, you might have to wait, 2 months for the book. And if you have a book club that's meeting next month, you're going to miss it. So um, it would be nice to have like every book I want anytime I want it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that Karen, that is a good thought. It's a solid area for them to go into. Maybe next, maybe
Mhm.
soon. That would be cool. So let's move on from services and talking about earnings, because there's so many ways that we can say they made a lot of money. Um, because they do, they always do. But let's talk a bit about some of these, excuse me, rumors that have come out this week about things we're going to see in the spring. Maybe a very interesting rumor about payments, about maybe it's not going to be audiobooks, maybe it's going to be a Square competitor that we'll see from next, or see from Apple next in
Oh
the
yeah,
services
that's the
department. So
that's the
let's talk
rumor.
a little bit about this. This I think popped up yesterday, and it really intrigued me. Apple is apparently testing the ability for iPhones to directly receive payments on a phone without any external hardware via an via NFC. You tap the little chip.
So my question is, how much would it cost the user? And is the buyer paying extra or is the seller paying extra?
This is the question. Oh well, I
Yeah.
mean,
That's
it.
always the big question because I mean Venmo and apps like that are sort of taking over because in most cases nobody pays it. It's completely free. I mean like cuz I use it all the time to give my kids gifts or pay them back for something or vice versa. And neither of us has to pay any
Oh
fee.
my.
Now there are fees involved if you want
Mhm.
like protection, if you're giving money to somebody you don't know so well. But if Apple can come up with something that's going to be free, I think that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think we might have lost Joe. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait, what happened to Joe?
But I agree with you, Karen. I think it'll be interesting if they do go this route to see like where are the fees, right? Because somebody's paying them somewhere, whether they're
Right.
behind the scenes or it is just your data or whatever. It'll be curious. I'm kind of one of those people who hasn't hopped on Apple Pay that much. I have my card set up to my phone, but I barely use it. I usually just pull out my card. Yeah,
I use it
don't
constantly.
I think
It's
part of
so
it
much
was
faster.
I think part of it was in Canada. It took a lot longer for it to roll out here, for Apple Pay to roll out here. And I think it just like became more natural once we got tap cards to just start using your tap card more, and then Apple Pay kind of fully sort of came out, and then so I think I just like out of habit I just haven't switched over.
Right. Okay. Because Apple Pay came just slightly before the tapping became widespread. So it was the choice is either stick it in the card reader and have to sit and wait for it for like a minute, or do Apple Pay. So I got in the habit of using Apple Pay pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was kind of the opposite here in Canada. We kind of like got the chip cards a little bit, or the scanning card ability, and then Apple Pay. So slowly stores started adding like Apple Pay capability, and it just like, so I think I just got used to, all the stores around me didn't have it for quite a while, and then I just got used to using my card, and so now it's more of a habit thing. It's not that Apple Pay isn't great or isn't, useful. I totally see it. I just think out of habit, I just like haven't gotten used to using it.
It varies by country a lot, because it was rolling out pretty slowly in the US, but I went to Iceland like 2 or 3 years ago, and they took it everywhere. I don't think I touched cash or a credit card the entire time. I was in Iceland for like a week and a half.
Wow.
And I paid with Apple Pay for everything, even like a pack of gum in the gas station or whatever. It was Apple Pay everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was convenient, and that kind of like got me in the habit.
Hey guys, sorry, I had some technical difficulties.
We noticed. We carried on.
Yeah. So thanks for carrying on, folks. I do appreciate it. I can't even remember where I was. Lost my entire train of thought.
Yeah, we were talking about the rumor that we'll be able to use credit cards on the iPhone directly,
tap
like,
our
without
credit
having
cards
to
to
use
iPhone.
Square.
Yeah.
Or those kind of apps.
Yeah, I think to your question, Karen, of who pays for that, I really think it depends on what Apple charges. Like, I think what Apple's going to do is charge a transaction fee through that. I mean, like Square does.
Right. I really like the model that Venmo has, which is there is no transaction fee if you trust the other person, because that's how I use it most, is with my own family. So I trust them. But there is a fee. Like if I were to buy something from somebody, there would be a small fee involved. That I don't mind, because then you're paying for the protection if that person turns out to be scamming you or something like that.
So here's my question about Venmo, because I don't use it a lot. Does Venmo require a bank account? It requires you to have a bank account. I think that is.
Yeah.
I think that's probably going to be a selling point of this Apple, let's call it service. Like Square, because Square also, like Square Cash, doesn't require a bank account, and Apple already has the cash card that they've got, plus that you pay people with over iMessage and whatnot, because millions of people, maybe billions of people around the world, but millions of people in the United States are underbanked or not banked at all. And that makes
you mean don't have a bank account?
Exactly. They don't have a bank account.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
And that makes a lot of things difficult, like receiving paychecks.
Right.
And that kind of thing. So I would see that, a reasonably robust Square competitor directly from Apple. I think that probably have a lot to.
It just gave me another idea of something Apple could expand into is banking, having like a virtual bank for people who aren't able to take advantage of traditional banks for whatever reason, whether it's the minimums or the fees or whatever. Apple could somehow get on that and give people a way to cash their paychecks legitimately without having to go someplace that charges exorbitant fees or something like that. I don't know. Kind of like how they got into the credit card.
A big bank that acts more like a local.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's the chance that they just eventually buy Goldman Sachs and just completely
Yeah.
integrate Goldman
I don't
Sachs into
know.
there?
I really like the way that the Apple credit card works. It's so user friendly and it's just easy. Like you get an email telling you it's time to pay the bill now, and then
Mhm.
you go into the wallet app, you tap on the Apple card, and every single transaction is laid out for you. And
It's great.
if there's a problem, Apple will remedy it for you. It's just I find I really really like it.
And Karen, now it's great you bring that up, and we'll talk a little bit about this as a whole. We'll talk not a little bit. We'll talk a lot about this as a whole later. But in part of one of the most recent betas, iOS 15.4, Wallet app has a new widget that is for your Apple Card, and it has
Oh,
that,
that's smart.
the bar chart that it has for each week where it shows your weekly
Yeah.
spending. That's the widget.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's good. And it's not the Apple card isn't necessarily the best credit card you can get in terms of
No.
rewards. I mean, there are certainly other credit cards that have better uh yeah, lower what do you call it, interest rates and better rewards, but just in terms of how easy it is to use, I trust Apple, and I think
Yeah.
that's the big appeal of it. So I think if Apple expanded into banking, they would do something similar where it would be so easy to look at, because like my banking app, I don't know what banks you guys use or if you have banks, but like my banking app is not the most user friendly. Like I really have to dig around to find my money. You know what I mean? I feel like Apple would do it so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, they would surface that. I do feel like they'd surface that information better. All right. And now some more rumors. A leaker has spilled the beans, supposedly spilled the beans on what we're going to see this spring, possibly at a spring event. Excuse me. So yeah, Mac Mini, 5G iPhone SE, new iPad Air, all rumored for a spring event. Now, interestingly, this leaker seems to have disappeared from Twitter, but we have the text of what
Yeah,
they said.
Okay.
that's weird.
So yeah, this is Dylan. This is Dylan DKT, who's been a fairly reliable leaker over the past several months. And so this is what Dylan is saying: Mac Mini with M1 Pro and M1 Max, ka-ching, new 5G iPhone SE, and a new iPad Air. On the iMac Pro, they say iMac Pro is still on track currently for a release in the spring, yet I have heard that there are still concerns with regards to production. So maybe iPad or maybe iMac Pro.
Interesting.
That'll be so, but yeah, Mac Mini with M1 Pro and M1 Max. Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me, and that's great. That's great news. That's exactly what I
Yeah.
want to hear.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want out of the Mac Mini, because we're expecting sort of, we talked about the sort of like dual CPU chips and maybe quad CPU chips with an astronomical number of graphics cores for the iMac Pro and then later the Mac Pro towards the end of the year. But traditionally speaking, the Mac Mini still runs laptop chips. Like this 2018 Mac Mini that I'm talking to you all from runs a variant of an Intel laptop chip. Doesn't run a full desktop. I think 7700 variant. I think it's like 7700B or something like that. So yeah, and M1 Pro and M1 Max are both excellent chips. See the most recent MacBook Pros. They're great. It's tremendous.
Well, and even from until the MacBook Pro, the new MacBook Pros came out, like the M1, just the standard M1 even performed like the best on the Mac Mini, right? Because there's a little more room in there for thermals and things like that. So yeah, the Mac Mini is awesome. It's a really great computer for people who don't want, a giant tower or just want a bit of a more minimal setup, but still be able to have like a full desktop with multiple screens and and whatnot. So it makes sense that they would up the power, given the access to the M1 Pro and M1 Max until we get to the M2 cycle, which will happen eventually. But
maybe starting this spring.
Yeah, slowly and surely they'll it seems like they're going to roll out the M's maybe always start. They might not always, but maybe it'll always start with a new MacBook Air, and then they'll find better ways to make it more powerful and keep the maybe there'll be an M2 Pro and an M2 Max at some point if they keep the naming schemes that
if they're going to insist on that naming.
Yeah, if they're going to insist on the naming to make it slightly confusing. But yeah, I think like anyone who, if you held off on the M1 Mac Mini, maybe because you didn't think maybe it would be quite powerful enough, or maybe just like that was when, the Mac Mini launched when the M1 was still very new. And so there was some questions about, certain apps working, how well would Rosetta work and things like that to kind of, make the non-native M1 apps work on the M1 architecture. So, but I think all those concerns are like, you shouldn't really have those concerns. I mean, like like everything is going to work for you, whether it's you running Rosetta or it's running native M1 architecture. It's all going to be pretty dang seamless. So I think like if you were waiting, maybe you didn't quite jump on because the 2018 or 2019 Mac Mini was still working for you. I feel like this will give you a good opportunity to jump in and then get a good power boost along with it. So
my thought on this is that it will not replace the current M1 Mac Mini. I think that's going to stay as sort of the lower end headless desktop, and then this Pro Max Mac Mini is going to be.
I see that.
That's going to be more. Maybe they'll even call it the Mac Mini Pro, and that'll be a higher end machine. Like, let me check. I think the current Mac Mini,
the Mac Mini Pro, that would be the that might finally lead to Karen's iPhone 14 Mini Pro, maybe.
Yeah.
If they get the naming convention in there,
we'll
brute force this into existence.
Maybe so.
So yeah, the current M1 Mac Mini starts at $699. And then the one with an Intel processor that they still sell, the only 2018 version they still sell, that starts at $1099. I wouldn't be surprised if we see similar pricing. My thought would be that it might start closer to 12 or 1300. And just because keep it a little more in line with the MacBook Pro pricing, but at the same time, you don't have to miniaturize as much for the Mac Mini, ironically, as you do for the MacBook Pro. You don't have a battery in there. And you don't have a display to worry about. Obviously, it's a Mac Mini. That's kind of one of the selling points,
right? And Apple wants to get rid of all of its Intel machines, so it would make sense to hold on to the M1.
If
Mac
Apple,
Mini.
I will be surprised if Apple is still selling like new, still made fresh in Apple factory Intel machines by, I'm not going to say the end of this year. I will say the end of next year.
Yeah, I think you're right, but possibly even by the end of this year.
Yeah, no, I'm just hedging. Obviously, I'm just hedging a little bit because it's entirely
since we're
possible.
Since we're not betting actual money, I'll go ahead and say by the end of this year, I think
Maybe
Apple's going to get rid of all
money.
So, it makes sense to keep the M1 Mac Mini as the lower end. Little.
Yeah,
computer,
I think so. I think so too. Like they are. They've stated that they're phasing out Intel for sure, right? So we know that's coming. We know they don't want to keep those around forever. I would probably back Karen and say like by the end of this year they'll probably pretty much phase all that out, sell off their stock when they'll still have some, but
I think that really depends on the Mac Pro, honestly, because I mean the iMac Pro will be a new machine essentially. It'll replace they still sell the 27-inch iMac, yeah? I
believe so. I think so.
I think they'll completely replace that with what we're currently calling the iMac Pro.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the MacBook Air, which has already been completely Apple siliconed.
Yeah.
And then the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Pro line is also completely Apple Silicon now. Yeah, you have the lower end one, the 13-inch, and then you have the 14 and 16, but they don't sell an Intel MacBook Pro anymore. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I'd have to double check, but I don't believe so. I think when the 14-inch and the 16-inch came out, they just dropped down to the 13-inch, and I don't think they sell any more Intels.
We're actually a lot closer to that goal than I think we really realize. I mean, obviously there's the 27-inch iMac, like we just said.
Yeah.
There's the current Intel Mac Mini that they still sell, and there's the Mac Pro. It's 3 computers. So we're like that. They might very well be on track to meet that goal, which, given the pandemic of it all, I think is actually fairly impressive that a company is making a major timeline goal, if indeed they do.
Yeah.
So good job. I'm
curious too, since the leak says that the iMac Pro is on track, but there's still some concerns about production capacity. I'm curious, does Apple hold it off and wait until there's production capacity, or do they announce it but they announce it but it'll have a release date for later on? Or I'm curious, because they've kind of done both sort of in the past, they've definitely announced products and then say, oh, it's coming in a month or two or whatever. But they've also
announced products and said, oops, never mind.
Yeah, they've also announced products and then you go to buy it 3 hours after it launches and you can't get it for several weeks. My M1 iMac, for example, took quite a while to get here and things like that. So
I mean, when AirPods first came out, for many months it was very hard to get a hold of a pair.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So I'm curious what they'll do. I guess it kind of depends on how hard they want to push it, how hard they think they need to get the iMac Pro out there. At least the announcement, if not. So I'm curious. My guess is the best guess would be if they are just having some production issues and they want to get capacity up or whatever it is, they'll probably, but they know that if they have a date in mind roughly about when they think that they'll be good to press the go button on them, then I'm sure that we'll see an announcement and it might, we might not get it for a month or two or whatever. But if they don't have a solid idea of when they think they're going to have the product in stock, or when they think they'll have a good, amount of them, or whatever the supply chain issues happen to be, then I think they'll hold off. It kind of depends on that.
I mean, basically it just comes down to exactly how constrained is that supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Before we move on, Karen, why don't you tell us about this week's sponsor?
Yes. Have you ever hit a technical snafu shopping online? Has filling out payment fields ever given you a headache? Has a mobile banking app ever been down when you wanted to use it? Capital One believes that everyone deserves better banking. This means easier access to their money and more security. That's why Capital One is investing in machine learning. Machine learning allows Capital One to do things like fight fraud with random forests. Models quickly detect suspicious activity and make it faster to alert federal investigators. Identify how mobile app outages happen with causal models. Keeping our mobile app up and running doesn't happen by accident. Anomaly detection and incident response help determine why app outages happen, so engineers can quickly remedy them. Speed up online shopping with machine learning at the edge. Make shopping with virtual card numbers smoother and more secure. This technology is based on logistic regression models and running interference in the browser. It identifies payment fields, which helps make using virtual card numbers easier and faster. The potential of machine learning is so big. See how Capital One is using machine learning to create the future of banking. Search machine learning at Capital One. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
All right. Thank you very much, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
So some interesting leaks. One of the things that I think is notable about this particular, let's call it rumor, because leak implies it is fact, and we don't actually know that. We're not going to know it until Apple announces stuff. I do think we can count on a spring event. Those seem to have been pretty regular in one form or another over the last few years. So
yeah,
I do think we can start counting on those. But one of the things that doesn't appear in this, and maybe it was never going to, was a MacBook Air. That stands out to me. And maybe that comes at WWDC. Maybe it comes in the fall. But I think we will see an M2 MacBook Air this year. Maybe just closer to when people are buying for back to school stuff.
Yeah, it could be that like they still have, I suppose, with the Mac Mini and the iMac Pro, they still sort of have their, their M1 arc. They're still maybe on, so maybe it has something to do with that. Maybe they don't want to launch the M2 until they can like launch it on its own, and then that kind of begins the cycle of M2 products we'll probably see. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think a MacBook Air for sure, an upgraded MacBook Air is going to be coming sometime this year, whether that be, in the fall or maybe at, like you said, maybe at WWDC. They've done that before.
Actually thinking about it right now, just a second, it does occur to me that WWDC is the perfect time to introduce the M2 because it's a developer event. And the fact that that the chip is an M2 instead of an M1 probably matters most to developers from just, a building apps point of view. So, MacBook Air, maybe they'll stick with having a lower end MacBook Pro, or maybe they'll call it something different, but it'll be functionally the same machine. I don't know. Maybe they'll introduce that too. But yeah, I think I think that's probably a good point, Luke, is that they'll separate the last of the pro focused M1 machines, and then they'll bring in the M2 a few months later. I mean, I don't think that's particularly unreasonable, given that the biggest advantage of a pro machine is like core count and GPU core count.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of the news from this week. The news that actually happened. That we verified, we all went through it. So first, Apple released iOS 15.3, macOS 12.2, watchOS 8.4, and tvOS 15.3. Which, let's get those point numbers under control there, Apple. They're getting wild out here. Why did watchOS jump a whole .x release? What happened there? You didn't have to do that, but you really, really chose to. These were not massive software releases from a user feature perspective. They had a lot of important bug fixes, including some pretty major security fixes for Safari. So if you regularly use Safari and you haven't updated yet, go do that. Go do that now. Yeah. Well, okay, so finish watching the show if you're watching live, and then go do that. It's very important. And so they did that, and then the next day was the really exciting day. That was yesterday.
Yeah,
iOS 15.4, watchOS 8.5, which admittedly is less exciting than the others. tvOS 15.4 and macOS 12.3, which introduces universal control. That is the big finally here. That is the big finally. I've been waiting for this for 6 months.
So have you played around with it yet?
I did do it, Karen. I did play.
And how is it?
It's so good. Like this is one of those things, and this is a sentiment I've already seen online, but yeah, absolutely worth the wait if it's this good. Now it's still in beta and there's some hiccups here and there, but mostly not.
I've been seeing on Twitter like people are thrilled with it.
So my iPad Pro got updated first. Like it got iPad OS 15.4 before my Mac got 12.3. I actually did that after work, whereas I feel more free to update my iPads during work because I'm not using them as much. Because
if that all goes kablooey, that's not going to impact your workday so much.
Exactly. And so this Mac that I'm talking to you on still doesn't have Monterey on it. I'm that paranoid about it screwing up my audio workflow. But but yeah, I installed the Mac beta last night, and then as soon as it was installed and I logged in and everything, I took my cursor from my Mac, and for context, my iPad was like a little up and to my left in my setup, and I moved my cursor over to the left and watched as it continued to be an iPad cursor on my iPad.
That's wild.
I didn't have to set anything up. I didn't have to give any permissions. It just worked.
Wow. That's what we want.
It's truly
that's why we love Apple.
It's truly one of those magical Apple experiences that I feel like we haven't seen as much lately, but it just works. There now, I should note there is an option that I think most people would probably want benefit from turning on that isn't enabled by default. So there are 3 options on Mac OS for universal control. It's in the display preference pane. So you go to display, and then I think it's advanced, or maybe you click on, I think it's advanced. It's got a new look to it. So you click advanced, and you can check these options. So 2 options are checked, and then the bottom one, which I think is automatically reconnect to an iPad or Mac when it's in range, that you had previously connected to, instead of, because I did have some hiccups when I put I put the lid down on the Mac and it went to sleep, and then I came back. It took a little bit for me to get back onto the iPad. But other than that, it's fine. So I think enabling that option is probably a good call. The really impressive thing for me is that the keyboard stuff worked too. So you take the cursor over to the iPad, and I think it's best if you click it just anywhere on the screen, but then you can do Command space and bring up Spotlight or something, or hit a keyboard command to invoke the or hold tab to invoke the app switcher.
But can you just type?
Yeah, you can just type
on the you can be typing on your MacBook, and it
types on the iPad.
On the iPad, wow!
As long as the cursor is on the
wherever the cursor is.
Yeah, wherever the cursor is where the keyboard should be. Now, it's also worth noting, and I don't know if this is just because it's beta 1 or if this is as intended, or if this is some kind of bug, but when you bring the cursor back to the Mac, it's a little you have to click onto something to be able to manipulate it with the keyboard again, or start using it in. It's like it's just grayed out you had switched to another app on the Mac. So it almost treats universal control as another app running on top of everything else in a way. Okay. So you have to click anywhere on your home screen to get back to using the Finder properly, or click in Safari, however or whatever you were using. But other than that, it's fine. I wish it would be more automatic. That's my basic point there. And I think it probably is supposed to be, but again, this is beta 1. And for beta 1, it's really smooth. I really like it. This is totally worth the wait. And especially being able to use the one keyboard, use my MacBook keyboard, or, this, nice mechanical keyboard I have set up in front of me. I will be able to use it eventually on this iPad to my right with this computer once I eventually update it.
I feel like once everybody starts using universal control, the sales of keyboards are going to go up.
Oh yeah. Because
people will be able to just use their one keyboard for everything. They'll be like, well, I might as well buy myself a really nice keyboard then.
Yeah, I think Apple's going to sell some more Magic trackpads too, or maybe maybe more Magic mice.
Yeah. I mean, I think mice and trackpads in general, and along with keyboards, will become more popular.
But universal control isn't the only interesting thing to pop up in this set of betas, because we've got some new stuff for iOS 15.4, starting with some updates to Face ID and using Face ID with a mask. So, Luke,
it's controversial.
it's a little controversial. So, Luke, why don't you tell us about this? Why don't you tell us about what's new with Face ID and masking up in iOS 15.4?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of. Well, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. Now it escapes me, but obviously when masks became much more prevalent here over in the Western side of the world with the pandemic, Apple, there was a lot of frustrations about Face ID obviously not working because it can't scan your face, which is the whole point of Face ID. So Apple did sort of release eventually a bit of a workaround where if you have a passcode on your Apple Watch and you have that unlocked, then you can unlock your iPhone with it, which was a nice little workaround. It wasn't like my favorite. I used it for a while and thought it was like just a little less secure than, having it all on one device, which was kind of like the big thing about Face ID is the fact that everything is done on device. It doesn't go anywhere, doesn't do anything. It all stays on the iPhone. So now they actually have a separate use Face ID with a mask is what they call it. And it's a separate feature that you can set up. It basically does more scanning of your eye and like kind of forehead area.
And the distance between your eyes.
Yeah. And the distance between your eyes.
I think maybe distance between your cheekbones too.
Mm-hmm. So it essentially kind of like focuses where your mask isn't. And gives it a way to scan that part of your face when this part of your face is covered. Then will allow you to just open your iPhone or iPad just as you would with just Face ID just by looking at it. I like that Apple didn't just drop it at the Apple Watch kind of workaround and just like left it at that because they probably could have. I think a lot of people were pretty satisfied with that. Although if you didn't have an Apple Watch, it didn't help you. And there's lots of people out there who don't have Apple Watches. So I like that. I was really glad to see that this was an option, and we didn't even really know it was coming so much. It was kind of a bit of a surprise, which was cool. I don't have the betas yet. I don't really have a good backup phone right now, so I don't like putting brand new betas on devices where I don't have a backup for them. So I haven't tried it out personally yet, but I've heard that it works fairly well. You do have to set it up in addition, because it is kind of like a different type of scan. But you don't need to wear. What's interesting is you don't need to wear a mask during the scan. I would have thought that might have been something it would have done. Like it would have asked you to like put on a mask to like set it up, but apparently you don't have to do that. Apparently it just kind of like you just set it up sort of like a normal Face ID, but it just obviously focuses on different features than it's used to.
I'm just curious to see how easy it is to fool.
Because
I think it's just such a limited part of your face. So you guys know I teach part-time in an after-school program and on weekends. And so my students this year are new to me and I've never seen them without masks on. So I've only seen their eyes. And there are, and other teachers at my school have said the same thing, that there are a number of students we cannot tell apart because they're not even related, but they're just seeing their eyes. They look so similar. And every once in a while you get a glimpse of them, like if they go to take a sip of water or something and they pull down their mask and they're like, you're like, oh, I didn't know your face looked like you had sort of created a whole other face in your mind for these kids. But anyway, it's just like I had like 3 girls in my class that just they have the same hair color, same hairstyle, and very similar looking eyes. And I kept mixing them up for like months because their eyes are just so similar. So I know the rest of their faces are not that similar. I'm just curious to see how easy the Face ID will be to fool in this mask.
That is what remains to be seen. I'm interested to see. I'm sure people are already trying to put it to the test, and I know, like, when it becomes not a beta feature, or if I maybe lose my resolve and decide to break down and get the beta back on my phone, and to try it out, I'll definitely be interested to see, how foolable it will be. Like,
it's not something I could test because I don't know anyone who looks similar, even just in the eyes. But you know that there are people that have similar looks. I mean, somebody somewhere has got to test this.
Yeah. And I mean, it's no secret that regular Face ID is obviously the most secure and most kind of foolproof way
Right.
on any new iPhone. So like this is by definition will be slightly less secure because it's not scanning as much. It's not scanning as much
Right.
unique, facial features and things. But
Mhm.
as our world evolves and things have been happening and masks have become much more common, and because not everybody carries around an Apple Watch, I'm really happy that at least Apple's kind of exploring this. And I hope that it works well. I hope that I don't think Apple would launch it if they thought it was too insecure. I think they're usually
Right.
pretty good about security and privacy.
Right.
So I am curious to see how well it works, and I'm even wondering like what's the fail rate on just your own face, because how sometimes Face ID can be
Yeah.
weird and just sometimes not work for whatever reason. Usually
Yes.
you look away and you look again and it's fine. But I'm
Yeah.
curious how many times that might happen when you're wearing a mask. Maybe it takes a little more. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I've had Face ID fail when I'm like I'm chewing. Like Apple doesn't recognize my face when I'm chewing.
Yeah.
Like, is Apple trying to tell me something? Put that food down. I suspect that some people are. I was surprised Apple put this out because it does seem to be kind of skirting the border of security. People were worried enough about using with the Apple Watch, but with the Apple Watch, it only works if the Apple Watch is strapped to your wrist and unlocked. So I think I still feel secure I use the Apple ID the Face ID with the mask and my Apple Watch all the time, because somebody would have to be wearing my Apple Watch and unlock it in order to be able to unlock
but
my
that's
phone.
that's not entirely true. You could be wearing your Apple Watch and have it unlocked and somebody else could have your phone. I know that's maybe not the most realistic situation.
Oh,
but
I see what you're saying.
That's why
Yeah.
that's why I wasn't a big fan of the Apple Watch.
I got you. No,
workaround.
you're right. I mean, you do get a notification on your watch, and it does give you the option to lock your phone back immediately.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right. If a person was holding your hand back or something, no, you're
Mhm.
right. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah. So I always thought like what was missing with that is like the best part about Face ID and always has been in any Apple authentication is that it's all on one device. It all stays in one place, which is, more secure than it going somewhere else, regardless of how secure you make that option. Right. And once again, as I'm saying, with the mask, this still won't be as secure as just regular Face ID. But I feel like, for people who don't have an Apple Watch and, want to be able to open their phone in a grocery store without, being able to have to type in their password or, take off their mask for a split second, which is not necessarily possible in all places. I think that it's good that they're exploring this. I'm curious to see like how well it will work. Will we find if there's big flaws with it or not? There's still some unknown questions about it. But I think overall, at least, it's still Apple showing they're still working on issues as they come up, which is nice.
It's giving people an option. People don't have to take. I'm sure it's something you could turn off, right? I mean, you don't have to use it.
I mean, I don't think there's too many of them out there, but I still know a few people who don't even use Face ID with their new iPhone because they just choose to have their phone unlocked all the time, which is insane. But
no.
Don't do that.
That is, I try to stay out of people's tech business unless they ask me. But the one thing that I tell people, if I see that they don't use a passcode on their devices, I'm like, you have to put a passcode on your phone. Why? I'm not trying to hide anything. Just do it.
Yeah.
Someone could steal your identity, basically.
If your password is password, stop it.
Oh,
stop
gosh.
it. You might actually be a bad person. I don't actually know. I don't know you, but you might be bad. So just careful or I'll judge you.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many of those people, but I know I've seen a couple in the wild. They do exist.
Oh yeah.
So maybe not everyone is as concerned about security as some of us should
be more concerned about security.
Yeah. Be at least concerned enough to put on some sort of passcode on your phone, please.
Seriously.
But
Apple's making it easier for you with mask on face unlock.
One last thing I'll say about the Face ID with the mask is, the little Face ID like icon? It's like the little square with the little face in it. Well, they have one for the mask one, which is just like a square and then the eyes and then like a little mask. And it looks so dang cute. I love it. It looks so dang cute. I want it.
It is vaguely adorable. Let's get a plushie of that.
Yeah.
Apple.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. So that's always a nice touch.
So yeah, there are actually a lot of features coming in these new software updates in iOS 15.4 in particular. So for me, I'm a big shortcuts nut. So
Mhm.
this is a big deal to me. Automation specifically have been enhanced in shortcuts in 15.4 because there is now a there's now a toggle for notify when run. So if anyone's got automation set up in shortcuts um, that trigger on specific conditions, you will be familiar with this. Even if you have ask before run turned off, you will see a notification when you run one of your automations. And now you can turn that off. One of the things that will happen, the consequence of this is you will see every so often receive a summary from Apple, specifically for shortcuts. It doesn't appear in your I don't think it appears in your notification summary.
Okay.
That says X number of automations were run recently. And then you can you can press and hold into that. And then you have the option to disable automations, which I accidentally did last night, and re-enabling them is annoying. It's not hard. It's just really annoying. So be careful with that button. Doesn't look like you can turn off the summary at all right now, which I think Apple does want to err on the side of letting you know at some point that your phone ran automations, because if they don't, I mean, people could just, they could turn on any sort of automation if someone untrustworthy gets access to your phone that isn't even protected by a passcode, whoever you people are, and then, maybe you send people financial information via text every so often, and you don't even get notified automatically, and you don't even get notified of that. So I was very happy to see this particular feature show up in the way that it did. Like I said, Karen, to you earlier, there's now an Apple Card widget. They only make the small square one as a widget, so there's not a
That's enough.
there's not a medium or right. It's also, that widget is also on iPad OS 15.4. I want an extra large iPad widget for the Apple Card. I don't know what we'd put on there other than transaction history. You can see how many times I eat out from food delivery services, but see how much Grubhub I buy, but yeah. So yeah, that's useful, and it's that useful bar chart, like I said, of the of your weekly spend. iPad OS got a keyboard brightness control center toggle. So if that's something you care about, this one's interesting. This next one's interesting because if you use something like 1Password or another third-party password manager, you're going to recognize this feature. You can add notes to your password entries in Keychain on iPhone and iPad now. I've checked on macOS. This doesn't appear to be a feature in passwords on macOS just yet, but you can just add a little note to a password in your iPhone or on your iPhone or iPad, just like adding two-factor authentication code capabilities to this. This is going a long way to making Keychain a more robust default password manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's see, custom email domains. This is another one. So custom email domains is an iCloud Plus feature. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the episode. Apple is now going to allow you in iOS 15.4 to create or to add a custom email domain to your iCloud Mail setup directly on the phone. It's in there. It seems to be working spottily right now, but yeah, interesting to see. And now also, let's see. Yeah, you can customize the TV app. And this is fun. If you use SharePlay at all, SharePlay in apps that support it will now be can now be offered as a suggestion directly on the share sheet of an app.
Yeah, which is nice. I think that's a nice little touch for sure.
Have either of you used SharePlay to any extent since it came out?
Not really in practical, mainly fooling around with it, to be honest. Not in any super practical super practical ways. I think a big part of it is that like I don't have a lot of friends who and most of my family members don't really use Apple products as much as I do, so it doesn't become as useful in that situation. But like it works pretty well from the little bit that I've tested it. Yeah, but I don't use it a lot in practice, I find.
All right.
Do you use it, Joe?
No, I mean, I'm kind of in a similar situation to Luke. Is there are a lot of friends that I have that don't use Apple devices or don't use them as much as I do, and it's also a matter of timing. You got to get timing worked out, and people have different schedules and all that. Like all my friends are scattered across the country, rather than across the city. So yeah, it's a whole thing. Alrighty. We have come down to the end of our hour. I want to thank everyone who showed up and commented and watched live. It's always great to see you folks. Big thanks to everybody who's going to listen later in their podcatcher of choice. Of course, we do this for the audience. Big thanks to Jim Metzendorf, our editor extraordinaire, who always makes us sound so lovely. And of course, thanks to our guest this week, Luke. It's great to have you on as always.
Yeah, thanks.
And until next time, this has been the iMore Show. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.